Good morning. Hey, it's kind of bright out here, a bit of a glare, so if you don't mind, I'm going to use some sunglasses for a minute. Today I wanted to talk about caramelization, about the browning you get on the outside of your steak, about the sear marks you get from your grill, or just from the pan on a stove. Folks, sometimes if you're cooking meat or whatever and you're not getting good browning or good grill marks, maybe you're doing something wrong. So I'm here to help you out with what it could be, explain what it's all about, how to get it, and what's going on. And it's going to involve a couple of scientists, one French scientist and one German scientist. So what we're going to discuss is how to get browning, whether it be in a pan or on top of a grill grate. If you set up the right conditions, you do it just the right way, you're going to get beautiful grill marks or a beautiful brown caramelized piece of meat out of your pan. Either way, when it's done right, it's right. Folks, this starts with two different people. Louis Camille Maillard and another guy, that's our French guy. Now the German guy I mentioned, the scientist there, his name is Johann Leidenfrost. Leidenfrost. I have a hard time with these names. Anyway, what happened here is, first of all, let's go to our French scientist here. Maillard gives us a definition of what we call the Maillard reaction. But folks, he was also the same guy that defined caramelization, what it was and what temperatures it occurs at. So you have this Maillard reaction going on, which is a reaction between reducing sugars and amino acids. And that happens with heat applied. Okay, so through what they call pyrolysis, you get this heat applied, you get a reaction between reducing sugars and amino acids that causes browning. Now, if you take a piece of meat and boil it in water and pull it back out, what you're looking at, that gray color, that's a Maillard reaction. Okay, that's what's going on there. If you take that same piece of meat, dry it off, and pan-sear it, you get a beautiful crust on both sides, but it looks gray on the edge. Okay, the gray on the edge is still the Maillard reaction. The brown on the flat parts that touch the pan, that's a combination between that Maillard reaction and caramelization, which is the browning of sugars essentially. Okay, and that happens at the upper end of the spectrum. So you have this Maillard reaction happening from 280 degrees to 330. And then from 320 degrees on up, that's where you get your caramelization. Now, the other guy, this other scientist, Leidenfrost, where does he come in? Okay, this guy wanted to know how water reacts with a sufficiently hot surface. Okay, what is sufficiently hot? Well, hot enough to make it not immediately sizzle off. I know. In the beginning, when you're not used to this, that might sound counterintuitive. You want it hot enough for water to sizzle off quickly, right? No, you want it actually hotter than that. You see, once the temperature of the pan goes high enough, the water doesn't quickly sizzle off. It just hits the pan and kind of beads up and rolls around in there. It skates around with very little resistance, and that's because the water isn't touching the pan. There's this vapor barrier in between the water bead and that really hot surface. That happens at 380 degrees. So what we're looking for is to take a piece of dried off meat and put it against a sufficiently hot surface. Now, why dry it? Well, because of the Leidenfrost thing. If we put wet meat down on a sufficiently hot surface, it's going to poach. It's not going to brown the right way. You're going to get the Maillard reaction, yes. It'll happen slower, and then finally some caramelization, but not enough. That might be what's happening for some of you. For others, maybe you didn't have the pan hot enough, or a combination of multiple things. So, we don't want any moisture there because we get that Maillard, or not the Maillard, but the Leidenfrost effect going on, and then we don't get proper browning. And we need the right temperature. Yet it's the Leidenfrost effect that tells us when the temperature's right. So it's sort of a good and a bad thing all rolled together. So what we do is we heat the pan dry, and this is very important. We heat the pan dry. When we get the Leidenfrost effect, then we put oil in it. And why not put oil in it sooner? Well, because number one, you can't use the Leidenfrost effect to test the temperature of the pan. If the oil's already in there, it'll just spatter everywhere. It'll be a mess. But secondly, you don't want to break down the proteins in the oil that cause for good lubrication. And if you heat the oil in the pan, that will happen. You reduce some of its lubricating properties. So, we heat the pan first. When we get that Leidenfrost temperature, in other words 380 degrees or higher, then we put the oil in the pan. Now here's the caveat. You don't want to cook with smoked oil. You don't want that oil too hot, because if you smoke your oil, what's going to happen? You produce carcinogens in your pan, and the next thing you know, you're eating something very unhealthy. So we got to balance between Leidenfrost temperature and smoking the oil, which is usually between 400 and 450, depending on the oil. I like to fry in peanut oil, so that's about 450. Corn oil is the same way. You get other oils though, and that temperature can come down. So pay attention to that. The other thing is it's the same way on your grill. If you come out to a grill with a wet steak, you're not going to get good sear marks because you're getting a Leidenfrost effect between the grill grate and the steak. All right, you want to dry that steak off before you season it and put it onto the grate. Now here's the other thing. That grill grate, it needs to be hot. Hot, hot, hot. So we have to preheat this thing. 2 or 3 minutes isn't enough. I got to preheat it long enough to get this iron grate over 380 degrees. Which means if my temperature gauge on the front of this says 400 degrees and it's just hit that, it ain't hot enough because that grate hasn't had time to heat up yet. Oh, and I preheat this, I preheat it on high, and I bring that temperature all the way over to 600. Usually give it about 10 minutes. Then I know that grill grate's good and hot, and I get a good sear. The next thing is, a good sear means you don't touch it. You put it on there, and if you're going to be cooking, let's say, a 1-inch steak and you want it medium, you're going to cook it for about 4 minutes on each side at a medium temperature with the grill cover closed, or at a higher temperature with the grill cover open, okay? And then you're going to flip it over one time. Now, if you want that cross hatching, you don't necessarily pick it up. You just lift it slightly and turn it, and then set it back down, and boom, you get your cross hatch. Don't worry about that. Just get some beautiful grate marks on there, okay? And that means just leaving it alone. It's the same way in the pan. When you're cooking a steak, if you want good caramelization, you can't get it if you keep turning it. You'll never cook a burger right, and it'll never be juicy if you flip it a dozen times on the grill. And the same way in a pan. Stop making your meat dry. You turn it once. Now, for a demonstration of all of these things, let's go in, get on the stove, and let me show you exactly what I'm talking about and how to get the right results. This will be fun. Come on. Okay, here we have our little test setup here. Now I have a nice juicy steak here, as testified to all the juice on the plate with the steak. We have some water. We have our pan dry, okay? There's no oil in it. And I have a couple of types of oil over here. I have some peanut oil and some olive oil. But to fry this, I want to use my peanut oil because it has a higher smoking point. All right, plain and simple. First, we need to get our pan hot. And that means, let's just get some flame under there and get it heating. Now, it needs to be said, and ladies and gentlemen, this is so very, very important. On a gas stove and on an electric stove, the size of burner that you use and how high you turn it up to heat the pan makes a difference. Right now, this burner is a little bit higher than I want it to be, okay? I want this burner to be on about a medium to cook this steak. All right, so right about there, I have a nice medium temperature going on. And that's based on the size of the flame. And what I'm looking for is to put my flame at the exact same temperature I'm going to cook my steak at. And it's the same thing on an electric stove. I want my burner to heat my pan at the exact same temperature I'm going to be cooking the steak at, which means that it's not going to be as high. Now you might think, well, I can heat the pan faster on high. Yes, but then you don't have the heat as even across the bottom, and this is a proven fact. Also, you don't have the pan at the right temperature. Remember, we don't want to smoke our oil, and if you're heating your pan rapidly on a high heat, you're more prone to smoke your oil than if you heat the pan at the temperature you're going to cook. So I heat my pan until it's hot enough to get that Leidenfrost effect. Then, after making sure there's no water in it, I put my oil in there and we put our dried off meat into the pan. Now that's something else. Let's look at the meat right now. I see a piece of meat here that's just quite wet. Look at that. So let's take something to dry this thing off with. And this is really important, okay? It may seem like it's not, but remember, we just discussed that Leidenfrost effect, okay? What happens when something wet hits the pan? You get, well, you get something that's not sizzling, but something rather that is poaching, okay? We want a nice high sizzling heat that's going to caramelize the meat, not something that's going to poach it, okay? So do yourself a favor, dry that meat off real well. Okay, there we go. Now let's take a look at our pan and see what the temperature is on it now. Oh, looky there. Now this is nice. You see, we've reached the right temperature. When that beating up happens, instead of it just sizzling off, looky there. A lot of it, folks. That pan is now hot enough. Now let's try something here. I'm going to bring the pan down in temperature, and we're going to repeat this little experiment right here with a lower temperature. See that spot in the middle where I put cold water? That is where it's sizzling, and that is where we have a temperature that's below 380 degrees. So this is below 380, so we got the sizzling thing going on. But where it's beaded up still, it's higher. So what I've done is I brought down the temperature of my pan. And of course now I have a beautiful water stain in the pan. We're not going to worry about that though. That's not the concern right now. The concern is, do we have the right temperature? Now looky there, I do not have the right temperature. That water sizzled off. Now it's on the heat, the burner is still going. We're going to bring this pan back up in temperature. We're going to get that Leidenfrost effect going on again, and when we get that, we'll dry it off and get started with that meat. In the meantime, I'm going to season my meat, both sides, the way I normally like to do it. I love using a seasoning salt, or excuse me, a seasoned pepper. This stuff, it tastes so doggone good. And I am not touting brands or anything. I'm not trying to push the product. That's the reason I didn't say the brand name. Okay, there we go. Alright, our meat is ready to hit that pan. Let's test it again. Ooh, looky there. We're almost at the right temperature. It's still giving a little sizzle. I don't want sizzle. I'm wanting it to bead up and roll around. So this is where the patience thing comes in. We're not heating it on high. If I heated it on high on a gas, I'd have a lot of heat on the outer edge and none in the middle, okay? I need it even, so that burner is pulled in right now and it's heating right here and that's spreading outward. That way I get a good even heat, a better searing action. Look at that. All right, we are there, folks. We have reached that 380 degrees right there. And our water tells us so. Isn't that neat, the way it just skates around? It's not sizzling off. That is where we have that vapor barrier between the water and the pan. Okay, now it's time to make this happen. A little bit of oil. Always make sure you remove that water from the pan before putting oil in there, or you will pretty much immediately regret it. You notice there's no smoking from that oil, which means our smoking temperature hasn't been reached yet, but we're high enough to get good searing. Now we're cooking. All right. So what do we want? Well, I'm wanting this to be a nice pink in the middle. So I'm going to give it about 3 minutes per side on that medium heat in a 10-inch pan. Alrighty. That's our timer telling us it's time to turn this over. There we go. Now we got a beautiful caramelization, beautiful sear going on there. Another 3 minutes. All right, so we have cooked this for a total of 3 minutes on each side, 6 minutes overall. I have a pan that's filled with delicious. Let's deal with this delicious. I'm going to start by taking the steak. Now, by the way, if you wish and you want to do those edges a little bit to brown them, just hold it up and run them over that for just a moment, and it doesn't take long. You get a beautiful brown on there. Now, what do I do with this though? I'm going to take this oil, I'm going to pour it off. There we go. And with what's left in my pan, well, this will be fun. First, I'm going to deglaze it. And I've used just a little over 1/3 of a cup of wine there. You can use any kind of wine you want for this. I recommend something you just enjoy drinking. Now, we're going to bring that up to a nice high temperature, because I want that to come to a good boil, which it's almost doing. We immediately deglazed that pan, which is exactly what we were looking for. So I've got butter here, and I want to take that butter, we're going to whisk it in. And the whole idea here, doing it this way, it emulsifies the butter into that wine, and then you end up with a sauce that is just absolutely beyond belief. Now, generally this sauce is made as a very thin sauce, as what you see here, okay, because it only has to boil for just a moment more after the butter hits it. And then it's ready for the meat. In the meantime, that meat is just resting. It's fine. It's not going to go anywhere. And that rest is going to be good for it. So you'll know, what I've just made here is a steak sauce of steak sauces. If you've never tasted this right here, you've missed out. Now, when the French do this and they do it with a red wine, they call it a beau rouge. And when they do it with a white wine, well, just different names. You have like a beau rosé for a pink wine like I used here, and a beau blanc, which is your white wine. And each one produces delicious. The red wine I find to be just a little bit too heavy for my taste. So I like to do it this way. What I'm doing is I'm reducing out some of that alcohol. You won't get it all, but we're just taking a little bit of it out. It'll thicken it up as it reduces down some, and then it's ready for the meat. All right, taking my heat down. I have reduced that beautifully. Now, let's take it and put it where it belongs. It belongs right here. Right there, ladies and gentlemen, a steak with a sauce that's absolutely irresistible. All right, folks, let's take a look at this. Right there, look at that. Just like I was wanting, that beautiful pink center. That is just perfect and pristine and beautiful. And I'm making a mess of it here, but that's quite all right. Whoops, there we go. Oh, That's the way to go. Nothing like the taste of meat that's had a perfect sear. And now you know what it takes to get that. It's not that hard. Just follow the rules. High enough temperature, dry your meat. Folks, don't preheat the oil, okay? You're gonna end up with some great food if you do this the right way. Thank you very much for watching. Please stick around for just a moment. I'm going to show you one of my recipes. They're really cool, and I'm going to show you where to get those. I provide them on my website as a downloadable PDF. Okay. Also, if you would take a look in the description box, you're going to see the links both to my website, S.A.Trotter Arts, and you're going to see the link for Texas Cooking Today for the rest of these recipes. Some good stuff out there, folks. Not only did you find out how to make caramelization and searing work for you, but you got a great sauce to go with it. So enjoy that steak sauce, enjoy that meal, and thank you for watching. And folks, stick around just one moment. I wanted to mention to you my recipes. Yes, I sell my recipes. Okay, look, some people, they give the recipes out for free and they charge for the tutorial. So I do it the opposite on YouTube. You get the tutorial for free, I charge for the recipe. I did a lot of work, a lot of writing, a lot of extra stuff that goes with this, okay? Come over a little closer, let me show you one of these up close so you really realize what you're getting. And then also, I'm offering one for free. We'll take a quick look at that right now. Come here. This is what I'm talking about right here. When I fill out a recipe, when I write one, I always bullet point all of the ingredients, okay? A simple one or a complex one. I, in addition, number the instructions. And often I'll give pictures with it. Now, not all of them are this well done, but this is what I'm going for on every single one from here on out. All of my new recipes you're going to see done this way. And on the end of the recipe, there's always a place for notes for yourself, okay? Right now, go to my website. You're going to get this one right here for free, okay? Cinnamon rolls. Enjoy that cinnamon rolls recipe and take a look at the others I have. They're really worth your time.